The American Colonization Society, founded in 1817, was an organization established in Liberia. The society put forth effort to get free slaves to move there. Slave owners were scared to see free slaves, and the clergy thought that slavery was a sin.
Africa's first republic, Liberia, was founded in 1822 as a result of the American Colonization Society to settle emancipated American slaves in West Africa.
Denmark Vesey was a former slave living in South Carolina. After buying his freedom, he helped to found a separate Black Methodist church in Charleston. As a minister there, he was able to encourage members of the congregation to rebel against their masters. But the rebellion was put down before it could begin due to leaked information, and he, along with 33 other rebels, were convicted and executed.
David Walker was a free Black abolitionist who in 1829 published his appeal to the colored citizens of the world, which targeted slaves in an effort to encourage action against their masters. His appeal also calls for immediate abolition and equal rights for blacks while condemning the barbarity of slavery.
In 1833, the British emancipated their slaves in the British West Indies, and American abolitionists looked to the Caribbean as an example of how to handle slavery in the U.S. William Lloyd Garrison was the voice of the early abolitionist movement. In 1831, he created The Liberator, an anti-slavery newspaper that illustrated the evils of slavery in order to convince people to join the abolitionist campaign. In 1833, Garrison met with delegates from around the nation to form the American Anti-Slavery Society. This group used similar tactics to gain support for the abolitionist cause. He was viewed as a radical in his day because he called for Northern secession from the Union.
The American Anti-Slavery Society said no union for slaveholders until they repented for their sins by freeing their slaves. In 1840 and so on, they published a weekly newspaper called the National Anti-Slavery Standard.
In 1834, the Lane Theological Seminary was held in Cincinnati, Ohio, and was led by Lyman Beecher. Theodore Dwight Weld also attended the seminary. However, when they started helping the Black population of Cincinnati, they were expelled from the seminary. After they left, they started preaching anti-slavery gospel in the Old Northwest.
To avoid the numerous petitions to Congress asking for the abolition of slavery, in 1836 the House passed a resolution that postponed action on all petitions relating to slavery without hearing them. The series of gag rules prevented discussion of the petitions and was finally repealed in 1844 by the House with the assistance of John Quincy Adams.
5 years after attending the seminary, Theodore Weld published the pamphlet American Slavery as It Is, which was distributed by the American Anti-Slavery Society. It was very influential during the abolitionist movement because it highlighted the hardships that American slaves faced.
The Liberty Party was a minor political party in the 1840s that advocated the abolitionist cause. They nominated James Birney in the presidential elections of 1840 and 1844, and although he gained little support, the party's effort was the first of its kind and helped to make slavery a political topic by pressuring legislators to take firmer anti-slavery positions.
Frederick Douglass was a former slave and eminent human rights leader in the abolitionist movement. As a regular anti-slavery lecturer of abolitionist meetings, Douglass was asked to share his story. Encouraged by William Lloyd Garrison, Douglass wrote and published his first autobiography, A Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. He garnered many fans and critics as they expressed doubt that a former slave with no formal education could have produced such an elegant prose. He also produced abolitionist newspapers like the North Star, which was used to denounce slavery and fight for the emancipation of women. Sojourner Truth was born into slavery and eventually became an African-American abolitionist and women's rights activist. In 1843, Isabella Baumfree changed her name to Sojourner Truth, devoting her life to Methodism and the abolition of slavery. She joined the Northampton Association of Education and Industry, where she met Garrison and Douglass. In 1850, Garrison published her memoirs in the Narrative of Sojourner Truth, which detailed her sufferings as a slave. Truth was one of the several escaped slaves to rise to prominence as an abolitionist leader.
Another prominent abolitionist was Wendell Phillips. He refused to buy slave-made products such as cane sugar and cotton cloth. He was known as the abolition's golden trumpet.
In 1847, Dred Scott, an African-American slave, sued for his freedom since he was in a free state even though he originally was in a slave state. 10 years later, Supreme Court decided that all people of African ancestry could never become citizens of the U.S., so Scott could not sue in federal court. In effect, in 1858, Senator Stephen Douglas made the Freeport Doctrine and said that no matter how the Supreme Court ruled, slavery would stay down if people wanted it to stay down.
This movement increased sectional tension because it emphasized the issue of slavery, which had always divided the North and South.
The development of the abolitionist movement contributed to the growth of the country because it eventually led to the abolishment of slavery.